But now, Webster, let's move very quickly now because I promised to go to these calls and get your take on their questions. To me, I mean, we've been expecting a war, at least a regional war. All these big think tanks say we need a war during these crises. We need a war right now as a political diversion. We see the North Korea situation. We see the Gaza flotilla. What is going on here from your research? What do you see happening?
Well, I think the main thing that you see is, first of all, that the world depression behind the scenes is destroying countries. If you look at what happened in Thailand, I think that's an example of a country going into a breakdown crisis because of the collapse of the world economy around it. In other words, the multiplication of failed states. Now, the other thing concerning maybe the Middle East and Iran in particular, you can see that the U.S. is losing world domination at a very rapid rate. You have, for example, Karzai in Afghanistan playing the China card, essentially slipping into the Chinese orbit, making economic deals with China. All over the Middle East, you've got the Chinese on an economic offensive. You've got the Iranians on a religious and cultural offensive. And the U.S. really has nothing to offer against that except naked military power. But that doesn't work either. You see, in Iraq, the attempt of the U.S. is to keep this guy Maliki out of power, to kick him out, and to bring in Alawi, who is much more of a U.S. puppet. And Alawi would allow the U.S. to use Iraq along with Saudi Arabia and some other countries to try to create an Arab-Sunni front against the Iranians, and that's not working.
A launch point.
Then you look at the Ukraine. The color revolution has been rolled back. Ukraine is no longer a candidate.
The Georgia attack failed on South Ossetia.
Ukraine they've decided that they don't want to join NATO. Instead, they've made another long-term deal to host the Russian fleet in the ports of the Black Sea. In Iran, the color revolution has failed there too. What you're seeing is the U.S. forced more and more back on the only option, naked military force with no moral basis, in the point where it's not even clear if that will work. Now, if you look specifically, countries like Egypt, the Chinese economic penetration of Egypt is going very fast. You've also got Turkey. Now, one of the things that's happening is as the U.S. power recedes, you've got the emergence either of regional superpowers or of regional superpowers that are sort of rivaling among themselves. Iran is a candidate to be a regional superpower. Turkey would like to be a regional superpower, and they seem to be moving faster than anybody.
Well, before in the Ottoman Empire, they ran it all, yeah.
Precisely. And Egypt, probably people in Egypt wonder why they don't do more to try to become a regional superpower. I think
so it's just like when Spain and Portugal lost power in the New World, England and the Dutch replaced it. We're already seeing the United States used up and literally losing its power as the Chinese and the Germans and others come in as the new technocratic suppliers with soft power and are literally colonizing these third world and old world areas with high-tech versions of glass baubles.
Just remember, though, that there's no ultimate reason for the U.S. decline except our own folly in allowing Wall Street financiers to make all the main decisions in the society, right? The reason the Chinese get ahead is that they have a much more industrial goods-producing manufacturing.
No, I understand, but Tarpley, specifically, because we're almost out of time, I want to get your take on Israel's activity and Turkey openly threatening, saying they're sending warships, 4 frigates in to protect the next aid ship, and saying this could mean war. And I think Israel is out of control enough they may attack Turkey now.
Well, what the Israelis have done, of course, is a very serious breach of international law. It's either an act of war or it's a crime. In any case, it has to be condemned. And it is being condemned all around the world. The Israelis are more isolated than they've ever been. And I think in addition to the criminal aspect of this under international law, you also have to wonder, what are the Israelis thinking? Where do they think this leads? In other words, they've lost sight of the fact that if you don't have a moral basis for force, this is going to be bankrupt, and it's not going to get anywhere. Now, usually, the Israelis would expect that the United States would shield them from the negative blowback in the UN and so forth. What I'm seeing right now is the U.S. may already be too weak to shield Israel from the blowback on this incident, this attack that they've done. And you can see that in the fact that you've got these new countries coming on the scene, right? You notice that Turkey, which is the protagonist of what just happened,
Security Council,
along with Brazil, these are both temporary members of the Security Council. They were the ones that tried to get Iran to make an arrangement to send some of their uranium into Turkey and have it enriched there, and then sent back to them as fuel rods for this research reactor, which has attracted so much attention. And the U.S. had nothing to say to that, even though this was exactly what the U.S. had asked for 6 months earlier and kept saying they wanted. And then they just say, no, that's no good anymore. And this is just, it makes absolutely no sense. When you start alienating countries like Turkey and Brazil, when these are now regional superpowers, you're getting to a situation where this entire U.S.-British imperial edifice is in danger of collapsing. The other thing you may get is a NATO crisis. Remember, the countries that have sent these ships are not, terrorist states. They're Turkey, Ireland, and Greece. They're all members of NATO. They're all members of either NATO or the European Union.
Yeah, all the ships were inspected.
And
all the Israelis can show us some 4-inch, 5-inch knives, and they're now calling those WMDs.
The Israelis have found no guns. There are no weapons, no explosives. They've undoubtedly gone through it. I would be very skeptical if they come up with any, because the ship, in particular the large ship, was loaded under the supervision of the Turkish government. So a NATO crisis simply is that Turkey is one of the most important NATO countries. You look at that Incirlik Air Force Base, right? That's the key for the whole Iranian and Middle East presence of the United States. Generally speaking, without the NATO logistics and military basing infrastructure, the U.S. is logistically so weak that it could not project any kind of power into the Middle East.
Well, here's the issue. Look, the Anglo-American, U.S., Israel, British Empire isn't going to back off. They're arrogant because they've got a plan, and I believe it's to start a nuclear war. Now enter what happened in Korea. Does that smell like a false flag to you?
Yes, obviously the suspicion around this is very grave because the main idea is that as a general proposition, it's absolutely clear that the United States has always used North Korea and the North Korean military nuclear issue as a means of keeping South Korea in line and Japan, especially during all the stuff going on with Afghanistan and then mainly Iraq. The thing that kept the U.S. position solid or relatively solid in the Far East was the fact that North Korea was there, and everybody had to be afraid of them. So if they've now gone one step further and actually done something, it's not clear whether they have, but that would fit perfectly. It could be a mine left over from the war of 60 years ago. It could be a torpedo fired by somebody, maybe by...
We know a big U.S. / South Korean drill was going on in these waters when this happened. Stay there, Webster. We'll try to get to some calls.